G'day, Peter here. It was fantastic to be a guest on David Evans' podcast, Great Australians. David and I have been mates for nearly 40 years, and I think that comes out in the conversation where David's able to ask me some questions which show an insight into the depth of that friendship over a long time. So I hope you enjoy it. I certainly did. Please like and subscribe on my YouTube page, and also go to David's page, Great Australians, and do the same thing there. Thank you, enjoy, take care.
My next guest on the Great Australians podcast is Peter Chambers. Peter's been a friend for nearly 40 years, former district cricketer in Melbourne, also had a great career in banking, and then tragically 2 years ago was diagnosed with MND, Motor Neurone Disease. He has a wonderful positive mindset which is inspiring thousands of people who have heard Peter talk of his predicament over the last couple of years, and I hope you enjoy this podcast where he talks about his diagnosis and the positive spin that he's put on it for him, his family and his friends. Enjoy, Peter Chambers. Well, good afternoon, Peter Chambers. Good afternoon, Peter.
David, yeah, good to see you again, my friend.
And I'll refer to you as Chambo because I've known you for nearly 40 years and you've always been Chambo. So for the viewers...
as long as I can call you Godfrey.
And that's a long story. Chambo, we have been friends for nearly 40 years and cricket was very much our connection. You were a big tearaway fast bowler. I was a very slow, boring opening batsman. And we became very close friends through our connection at Richmond Cricket Club. We formed great friendships, and we stayed in contact. We've had the odd lunch over the years, probably not as many as we should have had, and that's probably my fault. But there was a lunch a few years ago where I left feeling quite worried about you. You weren't your bubbly self, and you were complaining of a sore shoulder, and thought it might have been a frozen shoulder. Weren't really sure what it was, to be honest. But mate, do you want to give us the background as far as what happened after that lunch? Because life changed significantly, didn't it?
It did, mate, it did. And I suppose I lived with what I know now to be symptoms. So let's sort of introduce the fact that I've got motor neurone disease. That's, spoiler alert for what's about to come, but that's where it's landed. And I, with hindsight now, I know that I've had the symptoms for, I can go back to 2015 probably. Things like shortness of breath, and just a sort of numbness in my hands and feet and those sorts of things. So I've got a slow progression version, hence why we can date it back to that far. But it really started to kick in. I was just I'm so pleased I did now, but that male thing where we don't necessarily go to not very good at going to the doctor and those sorts of things. Well, I did go to the doctor and got an MRI. MRI suggested that a surgery would be the way to go to just alleviate the symptoms that I was. And by that stage, yeah, you're right. It's sort of that shoulder thing and numbness in my left hand. And I had some surgery, but that didn't go tickety-boo, as we say.
Did that accelerate at Chambo?
Oh, mate, absolutely. To the point where I've gone from just not being able to lift my hand. Well, sorry, I could get my arm over my head, but with difficulty on my right-hand side, to the point where I only had 5% movement in that right arm. So massively. And so that was in and out of hospital I was out. That was the middle of 2018. In and out a couple of times. Every test known to mankind, and very grateful for the effort that was put in. But then it sort of I probably had an 18-month period of not knowing what was going on, because there's all these things that can happen with operations that will come, that are nerve related, but will come good. The nerves don't necessarily die; they just get impacted. But so they're looking at 3 or 4 things, but time was going to determine whether that was the prognosis or not. Unfortunately, with MND, it's a case of looking under as many rocks as you can find, and when you run out of rocks, well, you're left with the ultimate diagnosis of being MND, and that was just before Christmas of 2019.
So I want to pause there. So just before Christmas 2019, you go to get the diagnosis. do you go to a specialist? Talk us through the day, because you must have been concerned, because I know for a fact that you kept getting different diagnoses of what it might be, and you kept saying to me, well, yeah, we just don't know, and it's got all the medicos stumped.
Yeah.
So tell us about the lead into that fateful appointment.
Yeah, so I was actually seeing, purely and simply by coincidence, again, it's a long backstory, but I was seeing two neurologists at the time, and they knew each other and they were happy to work together and whatever. So that was good that they were there to bounce bounce ideas of each other. And it's it took a while. Well, again, I remember every single meeting I went to, which was every couple of months. It might be MND. You need to prepare yourself for the fact that it might be MND. I don't think it is. It might be MND. So there's always this thing sitting on your shoulder, but the likelihood was that it wasn't going to be that. So it was an enormous shock. And again, coincidentally, it was the two neurologists I saw 2 days apart. So one bloke had the pleasure of leaving it to the other bloke to to confirm it. So the first bloke just said no, I don't know, might be, might not. And the second guy got the job of saying, nah, it is. So it was funny how that worked out.
And what were your thoughts on, what did you know of MND, or had you done research, given that was on the table? Were you understanding of what that meant?
I was probably like the rest of, and I think you and I live in Melbourne, obviously. So Neil Danaher's work means that it's so much more to the forefront in Victoria than what it is. I think, speaking of, just again, you find out things along the way. So I got told, and I followed advice of don't go and Google it. And you have a sneak peek here and there, and but it's it's one of those things you don't want to Google because there's no good news there. So I was probably again exposed like the rest of us, that we saw Neil's plight and saw his deterioration and whatever else, and that gave me a pretty fair idea of what it would look like. So I didn't go Googling all that much or whatever, but I just knew it was bad, right? I mean, it's terminal. There's no cure. I didn't know the nitty gritty of it, but I knew enough to know that it doesn't end well. So there's the centre, the Calvary Bethlehem Hospital in Mentone is the go-to for sort of neurological conditions, and that's where I went in that February 2020 to have it confirmed, have that diagnosis confirmed, and and that was confirmed at the time. And then you get into the conversations about what it's going to mean, and time frames and all that sort of stuff, because they're the experts. So they see hundreds of cases, sadly, versus a couple a year.
And Chambo, what does it mean for you? What is the diagnosis? What's the prognosis? Because I'm obviously going to get into how you've really turned this into a very positive thing for you and the people that are following you now. But as far as the initial shock of it, the impact on you and the family and Lisa and the boys, what was that like, and what is the prognosis?
Yeah, so the version I've got is known as flail arm. So you can't see here, but I can sort of, with momentum, I can get my arms to my face and those sorts of things. But for instance, I can't carry a phone. A phone is too heavy for me to carry now. So anything with my arms straight, I can sort of carry things around. Ask me anything with a bent arm, and I have zero strength in my arms. So everything's too heavy. So I sort of got to pitch my elbows into my ribs and pick things up to get to my mouth and those sorts of things. So that's So flail arm is the version of MND that I've got. So it affects the upper body, my respiratory system. My lungs are at less than 50% capacity. I had a pretty big slap in the face. It was actually around Anzac Day this year. So I've been having ongoing tests for my lung capacity, which had always been sitting around the 70% mark, and then it just fell to 50 in just before Anzac Day. And so I've had to have what's called a PEG, which is an endoscopy tube. So it's basically a feeding tube inserted. So it's just in my stomach here. That is for eating down the track if and when I need it. I don't need it now, but it's a case of once my lung capacity gets to a level that's too low where they can't operate on you, because it just becomes too serious an operation. So that was a real slap in the face moment when that happened. But again, you get used to that. You got a tube hanging out your stomach, and so what? Life, move on, kind of thing. So they're the two big things for me. And the third one's fatigue. So I can't. Lisa and I did it the other day. We just walked around, and I don't know, it wouldn't have been a kilometre, and I was exhausted. I was just shot. So I use a mobility scooter to get around, which is great. It's all about managing your day, managing fatigue, making sure you're not overdoing things, so that you've got enough gas in the tank to see the day through. I'll generally have a sleep most days. It'll be somewhere between an ad on the TV to half an hour, and I'm good. But again, I've just learned to pace myself during the day and get through my day.
And Chambo, have you come to the realisation that it's obviously there's no cure for MND? So
yeah,
do you want to talk a bit about that, because you have a very positive outlook on what this has meant for you, and you might as well now touch on what you turn. This is your call about your MND career.
Yeah. So look, I'll use the word weird a lot from I do use it a lot, and it is weird because the mortality bit doesn't. Again, I'm open about this. When I was diagnosed, they're talking 6 to 10 years is my lifespan from here. So obviously it's not news I want, and it's terrible news, but it's going to happen to all of us. And I've been given. I know the how and I know the why. I just don't quite know the when, but I've got a reasonable idea of when it's like. So look, am I comfortable with that? No. Do I hate that? Absolutely. Can I change it? Absolutely not. So you adapt your lifestyle, and here I am. We touched before we started recording that I'm in Noosa at the moment. I've spent basically the whole of winter in Noosa. My hands basically are useless during winter. I can't get anything out of my pockets, for instance. They just really seize up, and with the cold. So getting out of Melbourne winter is really important for me. We did the same thing last year. And that'll be probably with the goal from here. But so again, it's about adapting, and it's about learning what you can and can't do. And I find it difficult to explain well, because I'm yet to explain it to myself why I feel this way. But I haven't sought, and I haven't gone out of my way to change the world or anything, but it's kind of something that's found me rather than me going, I didn't set out to do anything really, just sort of, what do I do from here? And a mate of mine put me on to Nick Brax, who does a mental health podcast. And, you and I have spoken about that. You listen to that and like what I had to say. And that was a real turning point for me, because it enabled, because we're 18 months, probably 2 years in at this stage, and 18 months of that period had been not knowing. So that was as difficult as knowing, because I just didn't know what was going on. So at least now I've got clarity and definition around what my circumstances are, and I can deal with it accordingly. But when you don't know what's going on, it can be hard or harder to deal with. So that was a real turning point for me. That would have been late 19 when we recorded it. No, sorry, late 20 when we recorded. Sorry, I'm getting my dates mixed up. Late 20 when we recorded it, and released it early this year. And I don't know, things have just sort of snowballed a bit from there. A couple of people have listened to it, and I've been introduced to other people doing podcasts. And Nick asked me, and Nick just released a book, of which I was a subject of part of the discussion. And so he just wanted me to elaborate on 2 or 3 things that we discussed in the interview. And given I can't type things out now, so I can't write, and typing's on a laptop or whatever is difficult as well. So I'll just record it. I'll just get the iPad out and sit and talk about what's going through my head. So I sent that and sent that off to Nick, and then all of a sudden I thought, well, it's a good way of getting my message out. So I started recording these things, and I got introduced to a videographer just to sort of pull it all together in the background and whatever. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I've got these, probably 10 or 12 of these little clips that I've put together. And Helly's the girl helping me. She's an absolute guru. She's a whiz, and she set me up a YouTube channel, and she's posting these things on YouTube every week. And here we are, mate. I'm a multimedia megastar.
Chambo, you explain that well, because that's exactly how I see it as well. You are doing good for people by explaining what you're going through and your positive outlook. And on that Nick Brack's podcast, you talked about one of the biggest things, and your wife, Lisa, referenced it when I spoke to her yesterday, that it's been lovely how you've been able to reconnect to people, and when you get a phone call, it's all positivity.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really simple one. And I'm grateful, for people. Again, people have rung me out of the blue, and it's been a really, really positive outcome for me. And I've got, some of it's force is the wrong word, but look, I know full well. Are you going to ring me? How many times are you going to ring me if I'm going to sit and bitch and moan for the first 15 minutes of the conversation? Human nature says you're going to be reluctant to do that. So I figured out really early on that if I wanted to engage with people, which is absolutely super critical for me to engage with people, the onus was on me to make those conversations pleasant and pleasurable conversations where people would want to, to walk away saying, I've spoken to Chambo, geez, he's in good nick. You should give him a call. So the number of calls that I'm getting, it's fantastic for me that not re-engaging necessarily, but the people are wanting to talk to me because they're hearing on the grapevine or whatever that I'm in a good way and I'm coping well with it. And again, so the positive message, it's one of those virtuous circles that the positive message then comes back to give me another bunk up, and I feel better about things. And I'll come inside and tell Lisa, I've just spoken to so and so, and oh, good, how is he? And those sorts of things. So they're happening more than what they. Yep, mate, you know as well as I do that. Unfortunately, we let life get in the way of this stuff, and we've had this conversation over lunch that we haven't. You touched at the top, but we don't have lunch enough because we had some unbelievable times. Certainly, there's four of us. For those listening out there, there's four of us. Sadly, one of us, we lost one of our dear friends with cancer, but we had some wonderful lunches over probably 3 or 4 year period, once a month, and a lot of fun. And yeah, then
you took notes of those lunches too, which you'll let for.
I know where they are. They're
you make sure they get to the right place, Chambo.
Yeah. I know. Perhaps there's one of us might be in a bit more trouble than the rest of us. For some mischievous dealings, but we'll move on from that. He knows who he is. But we all became busier. Then we had families, and then our jobs got more important, and all those sorts of things. And as I say, life gets in the way of life, doesn't it? You don't know what's happening, and all of a sudden there it is. So to be back in a situation now. Look, I am effectively retired. Not my decision, but I haven't worked for good 2 or 3 years now. Other people might say more, but
can I stop you there, because there's a question in there that I want to ask, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I always had a feeling that you weren't 100% happy in the industry you chose, and I actually don't think I've ever seen you as happy as you are right now, as far as. And I'm saying that in a way that, as far as the fact that you've taken on this challenge of making your plight and MND front and centre for people to help them. But in banking, and Peter had a career in banking, you were very successful, but it was a grind for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, you've absolutely hit it on the head. And you can't hide that stuff. So, look, I enjoyed it. I was good at it, did it. And, you go through periods of your life where, you are enjoying things, but ultimately, is it you? Is it what you want to do? And to be perfectly honest, I never really found out what it is that I really wanted to do. And you know, you're a classic case of someone who's found their niche and you've gone to the next level of you know, starting your own business, which I, you know, take my hat off. Having been involved in banking, I've always had a great admiration for people who've, you know, started their own business and really taken that 100% risk on their own shoulders. So that's one of the things I enjoyed about banking, was seeing those sorts of people and what made them tick and what made their businesses tick. But yeah, by and large, I you know, it was good. I enjoyed it. I had some great times and met some great people and those sorts of things. But yeah, did I set out to be a banker and, you know, wanted a lifetime career? No, I didn't. So it's kind of yeah, it's funny how it's turned out now that I've found something I'm passionate about. And you mentioned sort of the MND component of it, and that's, I found by extension, it's moved into that mental health space as well. That everything I've got to say about helping people in that MND community can easily be transported across to mental health, and I think that's where I'm getting that feedback, that people looking at me and saying, well, if anyone's got a right to be shitty with the world and you know, and finding it difficult, it is me. But look, you know, there's no way this is defining me. This isn't the, you know, again, we've known each other a long time. I've never been someone to sort of punch my chest and tell people how good I am and all those sorts of things. But I found something now that I can talk about and I can be a voice for, whereas previously I didn't kind of have that, you know, in previous careers and those sorts of things, I didn't have that capacity to have a voice. So now I've got a voice, and I'm really enjoying using it.
And I think one thing you've always had, Chambo, is you've always had, you've been emotionally intelligent. So you've understood how the human psyche works around emotion and what makes people tick, and you read people very well. And I think that is absolutely playing to what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think I've always had that ability to sort of, you know, if you're having a bad day, I've always been able to unwind why I'm having a bad day, and get an understanding of, you know, what sits behind, yeah, why am I not feeling good right now? So, yeah, another mate calls me pragmatic too. It's a word I like. That I'm always able to think things through reasonably logically and come up with the, you know, the right solution or the most appropriate solution on things. So it's always a word that's sort of stuck in the back of my head too, that I'm pragmatic in my way of thinking. And I think that's really helping me now, because I'm not, mate, my life is so simple now, and this is probably a lesson we can all learn. I have the world's shortest checklist in front of me to say whether something matters or not. It says yes or it says no, and it's really that easy when you break it down. Life is that simple. Is it important? It is or it isn't. And I'm in that fortunate position now of being able to ask myself that. Clearly there's a greater emphasis on things being important or being unimportant for me. I can't sweat the small stuff. So yeah, I'll show you my checklist later. It's not that complicated.
Can you give us an example of something that came up that just, frankly, you would have worried about before, but now just couldn't care less about?
Yeah, well, probably one that was around my diagnosis was I had to, which became critically important to me. I wasn't losing sleep over it, but it was getting on my mind that I was given when I first was diagnosed. It was put to me that you'll lose the use of your arms in 18 months' time, which is on me now. So it was a question I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to hear the answer. Wanted to avoid it, but I had to. So the question was, well, what does losing your arms look like? What does that mean in reality? So I asked the question because I had to know the answer to it. I kind of knew what the answer was going to be, and it really just means what I touched on before, that the strength in the arms just goes, and you lose that capacity. So that was kind of how it was explained to me, but that was something that I couldn't leave alone. I had to know the answer to that, so it became important to me. So obviously you got a tick in the yes box. Look, other stuff, I suppose I just let go, on a daily basis. we're fortunate. We're from a financial point of view. I'm a walking advertisement for getting your insurances in place, those sorts of things. So we've been pretty fortunate there. So there's not a lot in my day-to-day activities that I need to worry about. It's all sort of fairly dry for me, which is nice.
Chambo, I know you are also doing a lot of planning for the next, I think you referenced before, 6 to 9 years. What are some of the things that you are planning for? For instance, there will be a moment in time where you lose the ability to talk.
Yeah. Look, and that's really interesting you say that. I haven't asked that direct question, and it's one of the strange things about this disease is that there's no single two cases that are the same. So I haven't been told that will be the case, but clearly it's on the radar. So I'm working through at the moment. I'm working through the technology side of support. There's some incredible stuff out there. There's a thing called eye gaze technology where you basically, Stephen Hawking wrote a book, based on that technology. So you're really just tapping out emails or whatever it might be. And
you actually word bank, don't you? You record words and.
I've got yes, how now, brown cow, all that stuff. It was about 500 sentences I had to record, and so that's now got my voice. So a pretty good approximation of my voice. So that again, if I lose it, then I'll be able to, with the use of my eyes. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, but this is where it'll be, that I'll be able to, hello David, how are you today? By the use of tapping that out on a keyboard through my eyes. So, go figure. Pretty special stuff.
Chambo, how are the family coping? As I said, I had a chat to Lisa yesterday. She's a very strong and obviously a very supportive wife, but how are they coping, and what would you say to others that are going through something similar, that where their families are obviously front and centre in it?
Mate, and the answer is they're coping really well, which is something I'm proud of. I don't want to take all the credit for this because I can't, but I knew that I had to set the tone for, again, if I wallowed in self-pity, well, guess what? They're going to follow my cue. And that was a real motivator for me as to how I was going to attack this thing. Mainly, I mean, Lisa's lived we've all got our life experiences. So we've been around the block a few times, knowing Lisa as well as I do for a long, long time. That I knew that, would she like it? No. Would she cope? Yes. And the two of us together, we've been a good team for a long, long time. And, I was comfortable and confident that we'd get through it really well together, which is precisely as it's turned out. The example from a boy's point of view, and for listeners, it's 22-year-old twin boys who are just wonderful kids, absolutely ripping young men. I shouldn't call them kids. So enormously proud of them. And the one thing that was really at front of mind for me was, if there's a message that I can leave with them, it's how to deal with adversity, and having, showing strength of character and not rolling over and those sorts of things. So that was really front of mind for them. And I didn't do it in a way that was unnatural for me. It was all who I was and authentic to myself. But yeah, it was really important to me just to say, well, you want to know what adversity looks like, come and have a chat to adversity, and see what can be achieved in adverse circumstances. So that was a really important driver. As a consequence, look, they're amazing. There's things like, you're in the same situation as me. You don't want to burden your kids with having to do these things for you because it's not their job. So we're in that period now where they have to help me get dressed from time to time, and I hate that, and they probably hate that, but they do it with a smile on their face, and and they're not outwardly showing anything at all negative in terms of supporting me in that way. So again, really important part of our journey together.
Chambo, I'm going to ask this question, and we both might get emotional here, but if they're watching this back in years to come, what would be the advice from Dad as far as life going forward for them and their kids, and their dependents?
Oh God, no, thank you. Look, I think they're living it now. They're through the family unit, and what I like about the generations of that age group today is they've got the openness that perhaps people of our age didn't have when we were growing up at the same time. So I think they're in a better position to cope with all this than what we perhaps were. We maybe had to adapt from seeing our parents. Again, fathers were probably more pigeonholed into that strong man who brought the money home and ran the house sort of mentality. To we're all equal these days and whatever. And certainly, my boys are classic cases of that. Look, I think they're just well-rounded kids. It's a really interesting question you ask. Watching this back, I just want them to be proud of me.
And they will be.
You did it. You did.
And they will be.
Fuck yeah.
And it's Tyler and Jeremy, by the way, the two twin boys, and they are a credit to you and Lisa. And they've got a massive future ahead of them. And are they similar mindsets on what you faced? Or was one played a different role? How have they coped?
They're very different kids. I mean, it's always been a fascinating science experiment kind of environment for us that we've had. It's black and white with everything they do and what they look like and what their interests are, and well, they probably share the same interests, but the way they go around it and all that sorts of things. So it's always been a fascinating experiment or experience for Lisa and I that they've grown up, under the they fed, they woke up, they got dressed at the same time for the first 5 years of their life. There was zero to separate the two of them, but these two completely different personalities developed over that journey. So it's fascinating to see it. So yeah, look, they're both wonderful young people, and they've got, I think their morals are really strong. They've both got their own views of the world now and how it ticks over. And again, it's, a lot of them are contrary to each other. So, one of the wonderful things I like, and they were up here for the first 3 weeks of Lisa and I coming up here, and the banter over the dinner table, it's wonderful stuff. It's mainly the two of them having a crack at each other over their beliefs and their morals and their ethics and the way they see the world. So most of the time I'm sitting back and just watching, the game of tennis unfold in front of me. And I love that. I love the fact that they've developed who they are in their own right, and it's a good position for them.
Yeah, banter back and forward. I can't imagine where they got that from. MND, talk to us about MND. And obviously, as you pointed out before, Neil Danaher's had a pretty significant role in opening everybody's eyes up to MND and its challenges. And do you want to talk about what Neil's doing and also where you're probably focusing more on and how those two things are different, but at the same time trying to get a result for the concept of beating, as Neil says, the beast? Sure.
So there's probably two support organisations. Again, coming from this is a national perspective, but from a Melbourne perspective, there's MND Victoria. So they're a support group that basically provide me with moral support, but also physical support, like hiring a scooter, a mobility scooter. It's at home, but I haven't seen it yet. But I've actually got a powered wheelchair at home as well, which the irony, I mean, you can probably picture the mobility scooters. They're big, cumbersome things, whereas the wheelchair, you can do a 360 on the spot and those sorts of things. So for me, getting on and off trains and going to the footy and going to the cricket or whatever it might be and leading a normal lifestyle, it's harder in that mobility scooter, just simply because it's a big, cumbersome unit. So that's why I wanted that power wheelchair, just give me that flexibility. So MND Victoria provide that sort of support. So again, without them, we're in strife because ultimately everyone who contracts MND is going to need that sort of support. And then Neil's side of things, I actually, a friend of mine knows the family and sort of explained to me that he went down the same route of sort of talking to MND Victoria and sort of, going through the research route. And to his reckoning, there was no one doing the research. So he said, well, bugger it, I will. And that's apologies if I've got any of that wrong, but that's sort of anecdotally what I've heard to be the case. And I mean, my goodness, what an extraordinary effort by not a single person. We only see him as the face of it, but I'm sure there's family and friends and sitting behind him that have achieved something. But the amount of money he's raised, there's about 2,500 people in Australia with MND. So it's a tiny little number, but all of a sudden it's got, it's known out in the environment. We all, again, Victorians know what it is. Lesser extent thinking this in the rest of Australia, but sadly that number doesn't move because there's 2 people being diagnosed every day and 2 people dying from it every day. So that number kind of remains reasonably constant. But yeah, you take Neil's efforts and tireless efforts out of it, and it's a different community, I'm sure. One that'll be swimming against the tide rather than getting some support and getting more, just more obvious support because of the profile that he's given it.
And Chamber, are you looking at medical journals every couple of months as far as the progress that's being made, or are you relying upon your medicos and doctors to provide that feedback?
More the latter. There's a lot of trials going on. I think the COVID world is, I was diagnosed right at the start of COVID, so none of that's helped, of course. In terms of, there's a couple of trials. There's one at Macquarie University and one on the Gold Coast and those sorts of things, which I dare say I would have been in a different position to have, chased them up harder and followed through with them. But again, just everything went into, we got put to the side in a COVID environment. So I've actually, there's a couple of trials now which are, speaking to my neurologist, they're only just starting up again. So from that point of view, it's a little bit frustrating. Look, again, they might find the wonder drug tomorrow. Pretty good chance they're not going to, but that's, it's not necessarily for me today because I'm again pragmatic enough to know that's an unlikely outcome. But if I want to be involved in these trials and be supportive of them, because it's not me, it's the guy or girl in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might take. And I genuinely want to play a role in helping that out. I'm not going to sit in my hands and think I could have done something and not done it. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Because you're not getting medicated now, are you? Only taking medication?
There is a drug which is it's a thing called Riluzole, which does extend. We're only talking months, not years. It does extend your lifespan. It's there's enough evidence there to suggest that is. So I take that on a daily basis. So that's a little bit of hope. And who knows what's going to happen behind that. So so that's really the only thing there is at the moment. But there's a lot of trials there. But again, it's you've asked about the journals. I'm probably following things on Twitter as much as anything else. I just sort of follow a lot of MND stuff and follow groups and that. So I see articles there. That's probably, again, it's a funny one, but I don't want to go and pursue it because I don't want to read things that I don't want to read, kind of thing. So yeah, it's a funny one in that regard.
Chambo, we attended a lunch with a few mates of yours a few weeks ago, and you were openly talking about your funeral and death, and which took quite a few people at the table back a step. But it was a remarkable lunch, and the positivity you gave to the whole situation, and you relaxed everybody, which clearly you've done on this podcast as well. Why do you do that, and is that for you, or is it for what you're trying to do to bring some normality to the situation?
Yeah, it's I kind of I know what you're going to say here. It's a little bit self-indulgent, I think, but I understand it's not. People say it's not, but I kind of going
No,
from my natural link.
I didn't mean to think it was suggest it was self-indulgent at all.
No, I know you don't.
Incredibly refreshing, and it enabled the conversation to go in areas where everybody wanted it to go, which is to look after you and to make sure that you knew how everybody felt about you.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it from that point of view at all. I find it in my own self when I analyse it a tiny bit self-indulgent, but I've now, it's a clearer picture for me, right? So the old analogy of falling under a bus, that can happen to any of us any time. So, but I've got the beauty, probably the wrong word, but I struggle with these, words to describe adverse situations, but I use them, of going out on my terms and being remembered on my terms. And unfortunately, with all the diseases and horrible things that can happen and everything else, it can be over in a heartbeat. So I want to be remembered in the way that I want to be remembered. Unfortunately, we've all been to too many funerals, and in the vast majority of cases, you've got a wonderful person standing up there who's only met the family that week, who says, I never met Peter, but speaking to everyone, he was a good bloke. Well, I want to be the one who tells people that Peter was a good bloke, and I want my terms to be discussed, and I just want I want to tell my story. I'm avoiding the F word as much as I can, not that F word, the other F word. I'm calling it a life celebration rather than a funeral, which I intend it to be. So again, this has given me purpose as well. I'm constantly listening to songs, and would I like to play that, and drawing inspiration from stories I want to tell, and so yeah, it's a great exercise for me as well to say, how do I want to go out, and then really just fashion what I'm doing around what that looks like. So so again, it's not morbid, but it's a part of what we're all going to face, and it's just given me another interest in. And like you said, I mean, people walked away from that lunch, what the hell, not expecting that part of the conversation to come up, but there it was, and everyone was relaxed about it, as you say, and and it gave us all something to chuckle about and something to move on from.
And Chabo, there was a friend of mine asked me a question the other day, which I'd never been asked this question before, and I was going to ask it of you, given your reflective mindset at the moment. If you look back on your life, when do you reckon you were at your happiest?
Well, Lisa will tell you right now, and Lisa's probably right. Look, you go through phases, I think, fatherhood and those sorts of things. That was an obviously wonderful period, and and still ongoing, obviously, so it doesn't change. It's just the nature of it changes. But you don't ever stop being a parent, and that's the wonderful thing about being a parent. You never stop. So that makes me happy in an isolated situation. I look back really, really fondly on our time together playing sport. The friends you make. You learn about standing next to someone in the hot sun for 8 hours. I really, really fond memories of those days, and I think they form you as a person in a lot of regards. I've always been a sort of a team person, and enjoyed that aspect of what a team can do together, and sort of tried where I could to formulate that into my working career. But yeah, they're probably I dare say little snippets of time rather than long periods of time. I think that's the happy memories that you walk away with. I was about to say something about what happens in the showers and those sorts of things, which I can see you're giggling about, and but that's fun, isn't it? It's good fun. All those things happen in an instant, and they're all over. And
well, we played hard, but gee, you'd go home at night and your jaw would be aching by how much you laughed. Like you literally laughed from the time you arrived at the ground to the time you got home.
Yeah, great fun, wasn't it? Great fun. And they're enduring, and the friendships are enduring, and those sorts of things. So I kind of and I think again, it's what we touched on before when we're catching up on those lunches. That it's a period in your life when you're still carefree enough to not care, if that makes sense. And yeah, you're not as responsible as what you have to be further down the track. All of a sudden, when responsibility kicks in, things get changed up a little bit. So yeah, it's probably those early those 20s were a really good period. A lot of fun, and met so many good people who were lifelong friends.
So last question, which is sort of the question that I ask this time in all the episodes we've done, is what's the advice that you would have given a 15-year-old Peter Chambers heading into the adult world? What would it be now?
Yeah, if we take the sporting component of it, a lot of people I'd like to think I was more of a self-starter than what I ended up being. I think we all mature differently and those sorts of things. So I didn't mature from a point of view of being a self-starter and realising what it took to be a very good sportsman versus a good sportsman. I didn't have that maturity at the time and couldn't quite figure it out. And these things happen in a heartbeat, and all of a sudden opportunities are slip through your fingers. So I think from that point of view, and I don't know how you teach that one, but it's probably one of understanding your environment, understanding the opportunities that are presented to you, and grabbing them when they present themselves, because they could be gone tomorrow. So I think that's an important one. I've always liked the word courage. So and courage comes in so many different shapes and sizes and the like. And I again, could I have been more courageous? And I'm a risk averse kind of guy. Could I have done things differently? I could have done 100 things differently, and they all would have worked out fine, because I'm confident enough to know they would have worked out fine. But probably wasn't courageous enough at the time to take some risks and to do things a little bit differently. It's a tough one, isn't it? I'm comfortable with how things have turned out for me as a person, and again the family environment that I've got and that we've created, and the friendships I've got, and those sorts of things. I've certainly got. It's interesting when you hear about regrets. I certainly don't have regrets.
You don't have a regret on the wedding celebrant you chose for your wedding, who forgot your wife's name?
She's just sitting over here, so
you thought I'd forgotten that.
One, that might have been a different decision, but that wasn't our decision. We picked a lovely lady, and then this Humphrey B. Bear impersonator turned up.
He forgot your good wife's name.
And she did forget her name. We've got it at home somewhere. It's on video. If we can ever find a video machine that a VCR machine that works, it'll be a funny viewing again. But the daggers that she gave him, they still live with me.
He called Lisa Liza. He had to say, "It's Lisa, not Liza."
And it took about 3 times to correct him. So he finally got it right. I'm not sure how you get Liza out of Lisa, but anyway, he managed to.
You shouldn't have regrets, my friend. It's been a wonderful life. There's much more to come. You said in the podcast how you wanted your kids to be proud of you. I've got absolutely no doubts they are. Your friends are proud of you too, my friend. And thanks for sharing your story this afternoon. It's been brilliant.
Mate, and really appreciate the opportunity. It's sort of, as I said at the top, it's this has all found me. And Lisa used a really, really important word, purpose, that she looks at me now, and the purpose that I've got in my life, doing these sorts of things, is what's keeping me going. And that rubs off, right? I mean, you and I have spoken about this, and other people. I'm getting feedback on, silly little chip videos that I've done, and those sorts of things where, people are texting me or whatever and having a giggle about it, and it's fantastic. I'm having as much, it's just a completely ridiculous thing to say, but I'm having as much fun now as I've ever had. So it's a new facet of my life, and there's no way known I'm going to turn my back on it, because it's got positives, not only for me but for other people as well. So yeah, I'm embracing it. I'm running with it. I'm enjoying it. So life's good. Life's good.
Well done, Chambo. It's a great episode. There's so many nuggets of gold in this for everybody, not just people with an illness or suffering mental health issues, there's just so many nuggets there that people look back on this and think, that makes a lot of sense for my life. So thank you for doing it, and all power to you.
My pleasure, mate, and keep up the good work. It's we're locked into this COVID environment, aren't we, to do things differently? And
we need more positivity, don't we?
Yeah. Hats off to what you're doing too. So well done.
Good on you, Pete. Thanks, Chambo.
Thanks, mate. Take care.
Best. Enjoy Noosa.
Beautiful. Cheers, mate. Take care.